What's up, everyone? Matt Gajewski here, back again with another college basketball breakdown. This time it is Sunday, February the 23rd. Couple big games coming up and a brief recap before we get started. I'm still on the road heading home today, so we'll do somewhat of a longer recap on the Monday show. But yesterday, a lot of high profile action that we were on the right side of. Duke in Florida in particular when we added the Discord, and then some games that we were mainly projecting as leans. One game I feel like I got wrong twice was the Wisconsin-Oregon game, where originally Wisconsin's up by 16 points deep into the second half, and they give up a huge lead, go to overtime, and Oregon ends up winning. I actually caught the end of that game. One of the few I saw yesterday on the Saturday slate. So we'll get into everything deeper once I can catch up later on this Sunday afternoon and see what happened. But we have a lot of impactful games this Sunday, and it starts up top with maybe the biggest Big East game of the year. We'll get to that in just a moment. I'll pull you to the graphic. Before we get started, if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. You must be 21 or older to play in most areas. UConn takes on St. John's. Biggest game in the Big East probably of the year. At least it's up there. Current spread is 4.5 points in favor of St. John's. And the total in the game, let's see where this is moved. I know it has moved a little bit. Currently sits at 138, a little lower than expected. UConn healthy. St. John's, RJ Lewis, he missed their last game with a groin. Low-level competition, so I think it's more precautionary. Couple other players that aren't really involved in the rotation. Brady Dunlap's been out for a while. St. John's a little more banged up than UConn, but both teams should be entering this contest pretty healthy. It's a rematch from February 7th, 2 weeks ago. It was a midweek game, I believe. St. John's won 68-62 on UConn's floor. That largely came because they forced 22 turnovers. They only committed 7 themselves. These teams are polar opposites stylistically. Resume-wise, UConn's 1-1 against the top 20. They have a win over Gonzaga, which is aging poorly, and they lost to St. John's. They also have 3 inexcusable losses to number 96 Colorado, 81 Dayton, which is aging poorly, and the worst of which they took last week as well to Seton Hall, number 208, occurred in overtime. St. John's hasn't played anyone, I guess I should say hasn't lost to anyone outside the top 25 of late. And that's including their little Big East slide, I guess the Big East slide in general, which is pretty crazy. Their losses, I guess I should say they haven't, I'm not really sure what I was trying to say here. Their 4 losses came to Baylor, who's 29, Georgia 45, Creighton 33, and Villanova 55. So that's pretty solid overall. They don't have any bad losses on the resume. Their wins, they don't have anyone in the top 25. There's what we were trying to get to. So no current top 25 wins, no bad losses. St. John's a little tougher to evaluate, but I'd almost rather have that than UConn aging poorly and losing in the top 25. Regardless, shooting edge is UConn's direction, more on the polar opposite styles. UConn can shoot the ball extremely well. They're a little bit of a liability on defense. St. John's can't shoot. Awesome on defense. UConn's 28th in effective field goal percentage, 92nd in three-point percentage. Much of that comes from solo ball. They're kind of reliant on him from 3. He's hitting 44%. St. John's is 3rd in total defense. If they do have a weakness, it is defending the 3, where they're 161st. Awesome at defending the interior. Could create some opportunities for UConn, but they were not able to capitalize on this in the first game. So I think that could be a little bit of a problem in this game. Otherwise, St. John's, they're winning largely on the glass, getting to the rim. They're 343 in three-point percentage, but they are not taking a lot of threes. They're 338th in three-point rate. UConn's defense is a little bit imbalanced towards the interior. They're 281st against their perimeter, 12th against the interior defense. It's not the best matchup stylistically for St. John's, but where St. John's really makes their money, and probably will do so again in this game, they hold rebounding advantages. They hold advantages on the periphery. Turnovers are a huge problem for UConn right now, with Hassan Diarra playing banged up and Aiden Mahaney being a complete zero. So we actually make this outside the 4.5. Only hesitation I have is Liam McNeely did not play for UConn for a lot of the year, so I think there are still some holes projection-wise in that. And wanted to see RJ Lewis in warmups. It looks like he's going to go. He's listed probable, so I think we do get RJ Lewis. But just a little hesitation, we'll probably end up with a St. John's ticket at some point or another. Don't really want anything beyond 4.5. Ohio State takes on UCLA in the Big Ten. Ohio State has to go across the country after their egregious loss to Northwestern on their home floor, an injured Northwestern. Only injury in the game is Aaron Bradshaw for Ohio State. Of course, Michi Johnson left the team long ago. Ohio State is kind of coming off a big losing skid right now. They lost twice last week. They're 3-7 against top 25 teams. Good wins, though, Kentucky, Purdue, and Maryland. I guess their worst losses are still in Big Ten play. They haven't taken any horrifying L's. Northwestern's not good, and Indiana at 56 isn't good, but still a pretty balanced team, just lacking some of the higher-end stuff. Going 3-7 against top 25 teams is not ideal. UCLA is pretty similar, honestly. They took an egregious loss to Minnesota in their most recent game, who's 85. They are 4-3 against the top 25 with wins over Arizona, Gonzaga, Wisconsin, and Michigan State. They have one other loss outside the top 50 to Rutgers at 76. These teams honestly have pretty similar profiles. The difference they really display is UCLA is 51st in effective height. Ohio State is 208th. Ohio State kind of missing on Bradshaw and some portal guys has left them vulnerable inside. Both teams are around 150 in rebounding, but I think this is an important matchup because both teams don't defend the paint well and they both have inconsistent inside play. Ohio State is vastly better at shooting the ball. I think their guards are a little better than UCLA's on paper. 59th in effective field goal, 26th in three-point percentage. UCLA is 16th in perimeter defense, 16th in total defense. Biggest weakness does come inside where they're 220th. Ohio State's not the team that generally exploits this, and I'm not really sure why UCLA does this, but they don't often play their best rim protector, Ade Mara, by choice. So perhaps Ohio State does have some more efficiency inside than typically. Conversely, UCLA 75th in effective height, 92nd in three-point percentage. For all Ohio State's flaws on the inside, where they rank 117th, they have very good guards. 7th in perimeter defense, Mobley. I mean, this team is awesome on the inside. So this kind of leaves UCLA with a tough choice. You have your best players, I guess, on offense being your worst defenders, like Bilodeau and Eric Daly. These players almost leave you with an impossible choice. And then on the other side, like Ade Mara, your best defender is your worst player on offense, which leads to some very tough decisions for UCLA and how they get into some tricky games. On the periphery, UCLA does force the second most turnovers in the country. That's not a huge problem for Ohio State. Again, they have elite guards. They take care of the ball. Bruce Thornton's been awesome for this team, as he is the elder statesman. The one place that you might see UCLA take an advantage is in foul margin. Ohio State 341st in fouls committed, UCLA 53rd in fouls generated. A couple micro edges UCLA's direction, and with Ohio State now having to travel across the country, we make this pretty close to the spread. I tend to lean UCLA's direction, but it's not one we're going to play because there's a few other games that we show a little bit more value on. Drake takes on Northern Iowa. Awesome game in the Missouri Valley. It is number 1 facing number 2. Spread is 1.5 in favor of the road Drake Bulldogs. Northern Iowa, the total is 127. Only injury comes on Northern Iowa side, Leon Bond. He has a patella injury. He's going to be out for a while. It's a rematch. They played on January 29th. Drake won 66-52. It only played slightly in Drake's direction in terms of peripheral stats, rebounds, turnovers, fouls, but Drake did shoot 62.5% from 3. That'll do the trick. Leon Bond was already out for that game as well. Resume-wise, Drake is 4-1 against the top 100. They only lost to Bradley, that happened last weekend, by 2 points, who's number 95. They have wins over Vanderbilt and Kansas State, so pretty good wins. Their worst losses to 148 Murray State. Very good body of work for a mid-major. Northern Iowa is 1-4 against the top 100. Their only win is against Bradley, weirdly enough. Northern Iowa has more low-end losses as well. They lost to 182 Southern Illinois, 238 Valparaiso. Interestingly, Drake is a weird mid-major team. They're 326th in effective height, but 19th in rebounding. That comes entirely off effort. Huge on the offensive glass. Northern Iowa is more balanced. They're 130th in effective height, 129th in rebounding. They're 8th in defensive rebounding and 307th in offensive, so it's more of a stylistic choice. They're just not attacking the offensive glass. They're getting back on defense as a preference. Very good at defensive rebounding. Drake, they won the rebound matchup 28-25 in the first game, so pretty even. As far as stylistics on offense, Northern Iowa comes in a little bit ahead in shooting metrics, 15th in effective field goal, 26 from 3. Drake is 36th and 49th, so it's not a big gap. But the main difference is on defense, where Drake is 56th overall, Northern Iowa 143. But both teams do have a clear weakness. Drake is 332nd at interior defense. That makes sense. They play a tiny team, tiny roster, tiny lineup. Northern Iowa is 178th in interior defense, but 274th on the perimeter. Again, Drake can shoot threes. Turnover margin is actually similar between these teams. It's just composed differently. Drake turns the ball over a ton, but they force a ton of turnovers. Northern Iowa doesn't do either. Foul margin's basically the same thing. We make this slightly in favor of Drake, actually pretty close to the spread, but what we do show value on is the over. We have this coming in over 127. Pace is going to be putrid in this game, but both teams can shoot the ball, and both defenses have a very clear weakness. We did the exact same thing over the weekend when Bradley played Drake. So we will hit the over at 127. Last up on today's slate, UW-Milwaukee takes on Robert Morris in the Horizon. 1.5-point spread in favor of the home Robert Morris. Totals 151.5. Only injury face on Fields continues to play through that hand for UW-Milwaukee. This is a game between the number 2 and number 3 Horizon teams. There's a big log jam at the top here. Number 6. The top 6 teams have between 4 and 6 losses overall. This game is a rematch played on January 29th. Milwaukee lost 81-79 on their home floor. Very close game. Both teams shot the ball well. Milwaukee turned it over 19 times. Robert Morris turned it over 15 times. That had at least some outcome, at least some part to deciding that outcome in the game. Resume-wise, Milwaukee's 1-2 against the top 100. They beat Akron, who leads the MAC. They're number 93. They have a bad loss. The only one outside the top 200 is Southern Miss at 285, but that is bad. Robert Morris is 0-1 against the top 100. They got blown out against West Virginia. 3 losses outside the top 200. 252 Delaware, 333 Detroit Mercy, and 217 Wright State. Stylistically, Milwaukee 169th in effective height, 1st in rebounding. Robert Morris 242nd in effective height, 55th in rebounding. Both teams top 50 in the glass. Milwaukee's number 2 in the country. So while these height rebounding metrics are just slightly in favor of Milwaukee, even though Robert Morris is pretty good themselves. Shooting-wise, Milwaukee comes in a little ahead of Robert Morris, 136th in effective field goal. Robert Morris is 202nd. Interestingly, Robert Morris has the edge from 3, but Milwaukee comes in so far ahead because they're 334th in three-point rate. This team knows they can't shoot threes that well. Instead, they defer to interior scoring, get better shots, live on the offensive glass. And they're 114th at interior scoring, something they can certainly do well. Defensively, it's pretty close. Milwaukee 175. Robert Morris 157. Biggest edge for either team defensively is turnover margin for Robert Morris. They're 66 in turnovers forced. Milwaukee's 329th in turnovers committed. Again, that had an influence on the first matchup. So it's a tough stylistic matchup for Milwaukee on the road, but I do think this is the more talented team. We make it minus 1.3, so there's the slightest of value to UW-Milwaukee. Not going to play this one unless we get a better number, which you'll find if you were in Discord, we have that listed below. No long-term commitments. We're basically just doing projections, spread total for every game, player projections, points, rebounds, assists, block steals, minutes for the major games. All that is available below if you were interested. Otherwise, that'll do it for us today. Thank you guys for watching. We'll be back on Monday for probably a little bit longer recap and breaking down those games. But until next time, we'll see you later and good luck.